Hello and welcome to a Broadway Family Karate video tutorial guide. Today we'll be looking at our fundamental skills, 8A material for our first achievement strike. Okay, three things we'll be looking at today. We'll be looking at our pattern for this strike, or for this term, which is the foundation Hyung. We'll be looking at two of our formal stances, the front stance and the L stance and the C step. And the last thing we will look at will be our kicking skill this term, will be the front snap kick out of the front stance. Okay, so before we get started, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the four stances that we are going to find in the foundation here. We will be focusing a lot on our stances this term, so we want to get just an overview of what they look like before we even get started with the pattern. So we're going to go ahead and start with the parallel ready stance. You guys have seen this. You may not have heard the name to it, but this is our parallel ready stance. Our feet are shoulder width apart, our hands and a fist right in front of the knot of our belt, and we're just in a very relaxed position. Okay, we're not really tensed up. It's not our attention stance. Our ready stance means we're getting ready to do something. So we're relaxed and ready to begin. The next stance, formal stance we're going to look at is going to be the front stance. With the front stance, your body is positioned to the front. Your feet are shoulder width apart. It's a long, wide stance. My front leg is bent. My back leg is straight. It's our front stance. The next stance you'll see is going to be the L stance. Okay. My heels are in a line with each other. A lot of times I'll cheat and actually find a line on the mat. Line my heels up. Both of my knees are bent. And about 70% of my weight is on the back leg. Now, the difference between, one of the main differences between the front stance and the L stance is in the L stance, my body is actually turned side on. So you should be able to see just a small part of my body. It's a very defensive stance. And the fourth stance that will be in the foundation here is going to be our old favorite, the horse stance. Our feet wider than shoulder width, knees bent, okay? Back nice and straight. Not leaning forward, not leaning back. Nice and straight. Okay, those are our four stances we're going to see in the foundation here. I'm going to go through the pattern several times. The first time through, I'm going to be naming the techniques in the foundation here. The second time, I'm going to go through and name the stances that those techniques are done in. And the third time through the foundation here, I will be naming the technique that we're doing and the stance that it is done in. So we're going to put both of them together in the third time through. Okay. We're going to go and start. Foundation here. Naming the techniques. So I'm going to start with my parallel ready stance. Remember, I'm going to start with my left foot. So stepping forward with my left foot, my first technique is going to be with my left hand. This will keep you with the correct side forward throughout the pattern. Low block, lunge punch, inner forearm block, lunge punch, high block, reverse punch. Low block, right foot forward now, blocking with my right hand this time. Lunge punch, inner forearm block, lunge punch, high block, reverse punch. Horizontal knife hand strike, horizontal knife hand strike. Okay, on this second time through foundation here, I will be naming the stances that the techniques are done in. So it's just like the first time, but instead of naming the techniques, I'm going to be looking at the feet. Okay. So parallel ready stance, front stance, front stance, L stance, front stance, front stance. I'm going to stay right here as I finish this last technique, so I'm staying in my front stance. Front stance, front stance, L stance, front stance, front stance, staying right here, staying in my front stance. Horse stance, horse stance, already stance, tension stance. Okay, those are the stances in the foundation here. Now, a lot of times we get worried about what our hands are doing, that we don't always remember what stances our feet are in. And actually, that's really important to make sure your stances are proper and are the best they can do, because this makes your technique stronger and better when you have a good stance, a good foundation. Okay, so this third time through the foundation here, I'm going to go ahead and name both the techniques followed by the stance that it is done in. Parallel ready stance. Low block out of a front stance. Left side forward. Lunge punch from front stance. Inner forearm block, kneel stance. Lunge punch, front stance. High block from the front stance. Reverse punch, still in that front stance. Low block, right side forward this time, so I'm blocking with the right hand from the front stance. Lunge punch from the front stance. Inner forearm block, L stance. Lunge punch from the front stance. High block from the front stance. Reverse punch, staying in that front stance. Horizontal knife hand strike from the horse stance. Horizontal knife hand strike from the horse stance. Parallel ready stance, tension stance. Okay, that is the foundation here. Our technique for our first stripe will of course be naming the techniques in the foundation here along with the names of these stances. Thank you very much. The next thing we're going to look at is going to be our formal stances for the term. I'm going to look at the front stance, the L stance, and the C step. Now, begin with a look at the front stance. Let's go ahead and parallel ready stance, and I'm going to go ahead and step into a left leg forward front stance. Go ahead. That front leg is going to be bent. My back leg is going to be straight. My toes should be pointed generally towards the front. If it's turned out, it's going to weaken your stance. And I want my body to the front. It's a really open stance. Now, the big thing you want to watch out, most people can get the long part of the front stance down. It's keeping the stance wide. The feet tend to kind of slide together. So you really want to make sure that you keep the stance nice and wide side to side. So that front leg is bent, back leg is straight. Kind of look back. If you can see your entire foot, you need to bend that knee a little bit more. Usually you can just see the tops of the toes. Now I'm going to go ahead and just keep my hands for this demonstration on my waist just to get them out of the way so you can really just focus on the feet. And I'm just going to go ahead and step forward with that right side into a front stance. Front knee bent, back leg straight. This is also known as a front balance stance. We don't use that term. We normally just call it a front stance. Now, with the front stance, it's actually pretty strong. Provides a good, stable foundation for our strikes. It's stable side to side, and it's even stable front to back. So what I want you guys to do, once you've gotten into a really good stance, I want you to have a partner help you test your stance. Mr. Discord, and what your partner's going to do, okay, this stance is solid on all four sides. He's just going to gently push, okay, on each side, on the front, okay, on the side, and on the back. And what you can do, you can shorten that stance up, make it a little sloppier, and then have your partner test it. Okay? It doesn't work that well if your feet aren't spread out. Okay? It's a much stronger stance. Keep everything, okay? And if you notice that you're a little balanced, if you're off balance front to back, make it a little longer. Okay? More support. If you're having problems side to side, make the stance a little wider. Okay? Wide's usually the problem. Usually front to back, usually the long part is not, it's the side to side. Thank you, sir. Okay, practice. We use these two stances 90% of the time. Front stance, and the next one we're going to look at the L stance. Now the L stance is also called a back stance, or a backwards balance stance. Okay? When I was coming up so long ago, it was a back stance. We use the L stance because it's actually a very descriptive term. If you look at your feet in the L stance, you make a letter L. Okay? You want your heels to be on that same line. A lot of times I'll use a line in the floor just to make sure my heels are lined up. You want both of your knees bent. You want turned edge on. Okay, with my front stance, okay, everything's to the front. In my L stance, I should be turned on. It's more defensive stance. And I want most of my weight on my back leg. Okay, makes it easy to kick out. Now on this stance, not necessarily so strong side to side, but it is strong front to back. So go ahead and have your partner come back in, get into a good stance. Let him test it front to back. Okay, so he can push. Okay, and he can push. Okay, I'm going to do a little push to the side. It's not very strong to the side. It's really oriented front to back. So I'm going to go ahead and switch my feet, get into a good L stance, and then have him chest it front to back. Okay, like that. Excellent. Thank you, sir. Okay. The testing of the stances is really important. If you're in a good, solid stance, your partner should not be able to push you easily off balance to the front or to the back for the L stance, or all four sides to the front stance. Now, the third thing we're going to look at today is not a formal stance, but it's actually a technique we use to get from a front stance to a front stance, or from a ready stance to a front stance. It's called the C step. It's actually really important. It's very helpful. It helps you really get into a good, solid front stance. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start in a right leg forward front stance. Hands on my hips. Don't worry about the hands. Just keep them out of the way. And I'm going to go and demonstrate the C step. My back leg is going to come in an arc in a C shape and step back out into a right leg forward front stance. So I'm just going to swing it in and back out. And I'm actually pushing off on this leg. And then it's push out. So what I'm going to do, go ahead and slide back a little bit so I got a little room to move. So I'm left side forward. I'm going to go ahead and C step, right side forward. Make sure you're in a good stance. Wide, long, bent, straight. Then I'm just going to go ahead and C step up the floor a little bit and just practice. Okay. Really trying to bring that foot in and out. Okay. It works backwards the same way. So if I'm going to go front or right leg forward, I'm going to go ahead and step back to the C step. You just want to go ahead and make sure each time that you're in a really good front stance. Okay? And then you're switching. So just push off. Okay? Practice. Okay? Nice, wide. Swing your foot back out to keep that width in your stance. Because if you don't swing it back out, you end up shortening the stance and it weakens it. So get a good C each time. Okay, those are our two stances we're going to look at this term. Front stance and the L stance and our C step. Our kicking technique for our first achievement strike is going to be the front snap kick. The front snap kick is performed out of a front stance, so we can practice the stance that we learned earlier as we're doing the kick. So let's go ahead and go right leg forward in a front stance. For our hands, I just like to keep them up here in guard. Helps with your balance. And when you're using them in practical application, it's good to keep your guard up. I see some people drop their hands. When we're free sparring, we kind of just wait for this. When people kick and their hands drop like this, so you're going to catch a ridge hand. Okay, so keep your guard up even when we're just practicing the front snap kick in the air. So when you're using it, your hands will remember where they need to be. So we're right leg forward in our front stance. We're going to be kicking with our left leg. Now the striking surface for the front snap kick is the ball of the foot, and that is the area behind your toes. Now to keep your toes out of the way, you're going to want to pull them back. So I'm striking with this part of my foot and not the tips of my toes. Once you start striking an actual target, the lesson becomes very important because slamming your big toe into a target a few times, it's very painful. So you're going to pull those back, strike with the bottom part, the ball of your foot. Okay, so we are right side forward, got my hands up in my guard. We're going to go ahead and break this kick down into 4 parts. So I'm in my front snap kick, or I'm in my front stance. For my front snap kick, I'm going to go ahead and start bringing it up into that chamber position. So I'm bringing that knee up nice and high. Very important. My chamber to be right here. Okay, next time I'm going to extend the foot, bring it back to the chamber, and then return it back behind me to the ground. Okay? So we're going to go through just nice and slow. And 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? Remember to retract. You just drop your foot down. We're going to step with this eventually, but even with the step, we still want to bring that back to the chamber. It's really important when we start doing these in multiples that we get back to that chamber position. So let me go ahead and count that through one more time. So I'm in my front stance. Front snap kick is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to go ahead and switch sides. I got my left foot in front, kick with my right. I'm in a good front stance, have my guard up. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Okay. 1, 2, 3, 4. Take it slow. It'll help with your balance. You want to be able to get back to this spot where you can hold it. Do a little better on that side than this side. It helps with practice. None of us have been practicing these kicks for a while, so we need to get back in the rhythm of them. But really work getting it back here. Okay, now on those, as you saw, I was kicking, returning my foot to the starting position. We're going to go ahead and look at another way to do this, stepping through. So basically, I've got my right foot in front, I'm kicking with my left. I'm going to go ahead and 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm basically just going to step forward into another front stance. So it's like a walking motion. And then back down. Get a little distance so I can do a couple of steps. Okay, so I'm starting right foot forward, so I'm going to kick with my left. And then set it down. And then kick. set down, and set down. Do that one more time with the counts. Okay. So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Make sure you're stepping into a good front stance. Okay, once you get the basics down, we're going to go ahead and do these on a target. So if you can get a partner, helper, and I have Mr. Giscone. Okay. As you guys can see, a new training tool. We don't normally, if you haven't kicked this in the past, it's going to be a good challenge. So I'm going to go ahead and take a small step that way, sir. I've got my right foot in front, guard up, good front stance. We're going to look at working the front snap kick on a target. We're going to go ahead and break this down a little bit. We're going to go ahead and first start with basically just touching the target. I just want to make contact with the target with a touch with the correct part of my foot. I'm just going to bring it right down. So it's just a touch and then back down. After a few of those, and you've got good control, we're going to touch it and then we're going to push it. Okay? I'm not kicking it. I'm touching and then pushing. Just like that. Touch and push. Touch and push. Okay? After a few of those, when you've got that under control, we'll go ahead and go into a regular front snap kick. Okay? And then back down behind us. Okay? This touch, touch and push, and then a kick. Let's go ahead and switch sides. Holders, basically, it's just holding it, belt level, away from his body. And remember, that's my target, so I basically put that where I need it to be. He's just holding it. Okay? So I've got left foot in front, kicking with my right. And I'm going to start by just the touches. Touch. Pulling those toes back. And touch. Okay. Touch and push. Touch and push. That's more of a kick. We'll go one more time. Touch, push. Now with a full kick. It's a slippery target. One more time. Okay. Pull those toes back. Even on a soft target like this, you're kicking with your toes out. It will remind you to pull them back. Now the last thing we're going to look at is that step through front snap kick. We're actually stepping forward each time. So I'm going to have my partner here, a little bit closer. He's basically going to step back after each kick. So I'm going to go ahead, not the touch and push, but just the regular kick, nice and controlled. I'm not worrying about power. I wanted this accuracy. Good smooth technique. And put it down. Then I'm going to switch feet. And kick. And kick. And kick. One more time. And kick. Just stepping through on each time. Okay. So that is our front snap kick. Okay. Practice the stance. Practice the kicks.